So I'm going to say something kind of different than the rest of the panel. I do recommend eating fruits, not in a huge abundance, like tables full, but I do recommend it. I come from a different perspective because I have a clinic, I have an outpatient practice, I don't have a retreat center. So I have to deal with a person, like most of the people in the audience, who may not be able to have the luxury to go to a wonderful facility and spend, some time out of their busy lifestyle. So I don't become a purist, I'm a realist. So realistically, I have to make my patients make better choices every day, as often as can most of the time. But part of what we understand is that the food metabolism is also controlled by their epigenetics, their metabolomics, their nutrigenomics. And so even as food has changed over the millennia, so has our nutrigenomics and metabolomics. So I still look at foods providing us all these phytonutrients, antioxidants, and wonderful things. Now, can people overdo it? Yes. And do people overdo it? Yes, especially when they get into the plant-based movement. They just kind of overdo it, too many things. But from an outpatient perspective and an evidence-based practice that we do, and we look at actually more evidence than people would want to say, is that we have to then show is that we have personal experiences, but is that what the evidence is providing? And so, like Gabriel here, he works with diabetes, and so there's a kind of certain range that he has to get the patient to actually have better improvement. So his tolerance of getting patients to 70 to 100 is actually phenomenal, and I appreciate that. However, when I look at my patients, I want to get them too close to 100 to 110. Is there some issues? Yes, there is probably, but I'm looking at all these other parameters because if the patient still has stress, if they still have inflammation, if they have microbiome dysfunction, if they have any of these other aspects, then you can eat all the wonderful food as medicine and it's still not going to be a true health outcome. So there's a delicate balance that I have to look at from an outpatient perspective, kind of more in the being on the frontline trenches with the average person coming in saying, hey, I don't have time to juice every day. I don't have time to go to wonderful places like these retreat centers. So I look at things quite differently. Now when it comes to cancer, because that's a little bit more of the area that I spend in as well, is that we now know since I was partaking in Johns Hopkins in an event where in 2008 we were looking at can ketones, when we hear about ketogenic diets and shifting cancer cell metabolism, because we know cancer cells have 10 to 12 times more insulin resist cells than normal cell, that does sugar feed cancer? Yes. So the concept was if people shift to ketogenic diets, for example, would that help with stalling or inhibiting cancer metabolic growth? And so we looked at certain things like brain tumors, we looked at prostate, we looked at colon, we looked at breast. And in the first month that people were actually on a ketogenic diet, regardless of how they were doing the ketogenic diet right now, because there's differences. There's plant-based ketogenic, which are getting a lot of nutrients, and paleo, which you weren't. But the idea is that restricting that sugar amount actually had a decrease in actually the growth, and actually there was a little bit of reversal of all four of those two tumor types. So the industry then took this data and said, okay, everybody should be on ketogenic diet, and then everybody spun it out on the internet, and everybody's selling products. However, what they didn't look at is on the second month of that there's a flattening effect, and on the third month, actually the tumor started to regrow, and not only did the tumor get bigger, but all the pro-inflammatory other parts of the secondary, tertiary conditions that the patient had got worse. Why? Because they were eating, particularly when they were eating an animal protein diet, of a ketogenic diet, it became a pro-inflammatory state. So we always hear this like, oh, ketones. Now, to go further, then in 2010, we started looking at, well, if we were to restrict the ketones completely, so if we took sugar completely out of the diet, 100%. So they can do this in an animal model. And we look at the cancer cells, and we put it on a 100% ketogenic diet. What would happen? Should it starve the cancer cells? That was the intent of the study. But what the study showed is that cancer is a metabolic disease. So we have to look at all the metabolomic factors that actually what feeds cancer. Sugar is one of them. But guess what? When we restrict sugar 100%, the cancer cell can switch over to use ketones. I want everybody to hear that. Cancer cells can use ketones. So in a diabetic state, to get it to a lower state is absolutely, can be wonderful and helpful in reversing that disease. But we have to be careful sometimes if, everybody's want to shift this much. When Gabriel is treating a diabetic, that might be important for that diabetic patient because we're actually trying to reverse the disease and then slowly entering, like maybe adding more food back in some of these patients. Because just like with heart disease, they kind of restrict a little bit of the oil, but later on they might, because we're looking at a single disease that we're trying to kind of grasp and reverse the physiology. But when we look at the ketones, then in the study, not only did the cancer cells grow, but the metastasis went 10 times increase higher in the animal model. Okay, so we got really cautious. Now, even more important is that when they ligate the blood flow, the vascular flow, meaning the arteries that go to the tumor, because some tumors, they actually get, they have this vascular endothelial growth factor. So they grow blood vessels because it's trying to steal the body's supply of energy, right? It's the source. So when they actually ligate those tumors completely, so there's actually no blood flow going back to the tumor still grows when their ketones are still present. So there's other metabolic processes that we still even physiologically understand that actually will fuel, because cancer is very interesting. It's been around for millennia. It's nothing new. There's a variety of new factors that would trigger that increase of growth in patients and onset of that more than ever in history. But cancer is like a cockroach. It learns how to adapt to its environment. So 1,000 years ago, there was cockroaches. So we can have a Hiroshima, we can have a Fukushima. Cockroaches are still coming out, right? Because there's an adaptability. So we have to always be one step ahead of that. And when we look at the cancer cell metabolism, there's thousands of different pathways now that we understand. That's when we look at natural plant foods, when we say food is medicine, because it's not a single pathway. It's not a single drug. So the false belief system, I'll talk about cancer real quick, is that when we give drugs, as targeted therapies, I'm going to block this hormone blocker, for example. I'm going to use tamoxifen. Does it block that receptor? Absolutely. Why is it not curing breast cancer that's estrogen positive? It's because there's hundreds of other receptors on that cancer cell that we don't have a drug yet for. And this is where the vitamins and minerals and antioxidants, they play this role. Right now, there's 176 biological drugs in stage 3 clinical trials for cancer. So when I see cancer patients, they're like, oh, I'm taking this new drug and this new drug to block this receptor, this receptor, and that receptor. That's really good. I'm like, is it going to block those receptors? Absolutely. Is there side effects? Absolutely. But why isn't it not curative? It can help shrink the tumor for a temporary period of time. It can actually get people over the hump. But why is it not curative? It's because the cancer cell has hundreds of receptors. And this is where the food is super important. So when I come back to fruit, when I come back to other things, I have to look at all these other factors. And sometimes I have to kind of negotiate. It's a game, it's a balance, a delicate balance. How much do you do for your brain? How much do you do for your heart? How much do you do for cancer cells? So there's a little bit of a juggle. And so I have to take, what I look at is, I have to look at each patient individually and then look at and assess all of these things. Because in the real world, it'd be perfect to do some of these things. I'm not disagreeing with my colleagues here on the panel. However, I have to look at, based on each person, what is best for them. Because most people will come in with multiple diseases, right? So they have diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Right? So it's tough. I'm not saying any of these people are wrong. I'm not saying I'm completely right. And what I'm saying is that it's more complicated than people think. So what I want to do is shift people at the end of the day. So when you come home, because I don't want people leaving saying, don't eat fruit or don't do this or don't do that. I want them to understand it's like you need to be shifting to eating more plants than animal proteins. You need to be eating more organically. You need to have more community service, more spiritual practice. there's all these wonderful things that actually make the foods work better. Because if we put people in a bubble, for example, even if we give them organic food, and even if they're vegan, and even if we have all these wonderful pure air, there's even studies in the biosphere that 2 of the people didn't get along in the study, and then all their inflammatory markers went up, even though everything was controlled that was anti-inflammatory.
The biosphere in Arizona,
Yeah.
and they were all on this thing for a few years. That's what he's talking about.
So the idea is that stress. If we can't control the stress, we're all kind of micromanaging because that's what we do. We're doctors and we're scientists and we're health providers. So we want to kind of manipulate what we can, but we have to look at some things supersede that. So I'll just finish up with this, because when we look at mind-body medicine, which is a very important aspect, there was a study that came out recently, and it was a study. I was at a conference. This lady from Harvard, she's a psychiatrist, and they call it the shake study for just a simple fact of discussing it. So the shake studies, they had these 2 shakes, for example, right? And in one shake, it said super chocolate, super delicious. It had 1,500 calories, saturated fat, cholesterol, blah, 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 sugar, dairy, all these wonderful things that, people go, oh my God, it's going to kill me. It's so good for me, right? Like I think of a Blizzard or a Dairy Queen or some kind of, really, really, really something that's very sinful and bad for us. But we've all eaten it sometime in our lifetime. And then there was a second shake that was just like a green drink. Didn't say anything. It was 150 calories and didn't really have anything else on there. It was just simple ingredients. It wasn't no cholesterol, nothing. So when the patients, they had as 2 groups, when they drank the shake, they read this bottle, they drank it, and then they measured their blood parameters. An interesting thing, with the bad, super fat, high cholesterol shake, cholesterol went up, blood sugar went up, all their neurotransmitters went up for fight or flight, all their inflammatory markers went up. Okay, so all these things that you would think, this is a terrible thing to drink, it's got all this bad stuff for it. So of course the blood sugar and the cholesterol is going to go up, etc. So of course there's going to be inflammation. Second group, they look at this and they drink the shake, They measure the blood, nothing much happens. Body's not freaking out, it's just enjoying it, it's having its good time. Then they take the group again and they swap them. So this group goes over here, they drink, look at the shake, they drink it, all these inflammatory markers, blood sugar markers go up, all these things are going crazy. Again, this other group, they look at it, so it's a crossover study. So these people drink the shake. Now, at the end of the day, they reveal that the shake is the same thing. But it's what they read on the bottle and how they perceive. So now here's the interesting thing, though. If the shake has the same calories, and basically they were both the low fat, the kind of the plant-based shake, how does someone's cholesterol go up? How does someone's blood sugar go up? How does someone's inflammatory marker go up when they're all anti-inflammatory stuff in there? Because that's the power of the mind. So why I want to bring this up as an idea, because when we go to these controlled environments, it's good because they have a wonderful environment, they have a wonderful support, they have educational lectures, etc. But when I deal with someone in the real world, it's like, how are they going to get through their day? They got to take the kids, they got to pick them up, they got to pay the bills. So these are things like, if we don't control the stress, I don't care how much wheatgrass you drink or how much turmeric you take. Like, there's an aspect of how do we make, the mindfulness. He gives these wonderful prayers. And there's aspects of this is so important that people need to understand that you can change your medicine. You can change how, if you spend some time, not just popping in your mouth the supplement, or even just, here's my smoothie, I'm just cramming it down, but be mindful. They're showing, just 2 minutes a day, just being aware of what, has brought that food, who grew that food, where did it come from? I mean, that actually I've shown. So when I look at controlling blood sugar, I don't get into that minutia, because as long as I'm moving them in the direction, all these other parameters will get better.